This is the captain of the Enterprise. Ship.
Podcasting, the final frontier. These are the ridiculous introductions I am forced to read at gunpoint, or should I say phaser point.
Ship.
Welcome to Ship, yet another in the long line of tedious Star Trek podcasts. This show is hosted by David Lawler and David B. Anderson. The two Davids will take you on a journey through time and space every 3 or 4 weeks, boldly podcasting where no podcast has gone before. Seriously? This is what you're making me read? Take it away, boys.
Good evening, I'm David Anderson, and I'm here with my co-host Dave Lawler, and we're doing the show, I forgot the name of the show.
It's called
Ship to Ship. Ship to Ship.
There you go.
A Star Trek podcast.
Fascinating.
That's it.
Let's take it away.
I'm losing command. I'm losing the Enterprise.
All right. Well, how are you? How are you, David?
I am well. We watched the shows. It was an interesting sort of situation for me because it's been so long since I've seen them. It was like sort of a revisiting, yet when I watched them on Netflix, so they were the cleaned up. It was like they say with Star Wars, watch them again for the first time. You know?
You watched the remastered versions, right?
The remastered version where I felt like, they could have remastered it and kept the old special effects in, but they decided to remaster it, clean it up, and then put new special effects in, which I felt took a little bit away from the show because it's like the inside of the place is very sort of 60s cheesy, and then they have these kind of
incredibly cleaned up, beautiful new visual effects.
Decent special effects, although it seemed like they were also trying to sort of create the look of the old show, but it's like the old show.
This is going to be interesting because I really like those new effects. I wrote a little bit in my notes about how much I have really enjoyed looking at some of these new visual effects. They were fantastic.
Well, they also redid the sound a little bit too. I mean, because I watched it on, they showed them on Netflix. They're in full Dolby Digital 5.1 surround sound.
Yeah.
So,
actually, I think that the opening music for the opening credits and everything,
I think it's a
it's all done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's redone. It's very nice.
It feels different. It feels like it's a different, like they didn't just go back to the original stereo recordings and just redo it. It seems like they actually did new ones and put them in there. That's what it sounds like. Or maybe it's just so clear that I never heard it that clear before.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. We'll get into that. We're going to get into that because we're going to talk about that. This is going to be very exciting. I'm very happy to be doing this with David too. He's a Star Trek guy. He's more of a movie guy though. He went to the movies.
I'm more of a Star Trek movie guy. So this is like an interesting sort of juxtaposition, sort of a comparison of how they did the movies and how they did the show. And although I will say, like, I watched the show when it was on, and actually in the reruns, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
In a weird way, my brother kind of watched them when they were on in my mother's womb because that's one of my mom's stories. Like, I used to watch this show when I was pregnant with Robert. That's my brother. I used to love that show.
Yeah, she watched it first run?
Yeah,
when it was on NBC. My mother did too. She was like a big Star Trek fan.
My brother was born in 1967, in summer of '67. So I'm going to guess he was probably conceived right as the premiere was happening. I'm going to guess September-ish of '66.
Yeah. And
he was born in July of '67. So.
Yeah.
Do that math of perhaps it was the sexiness of Shatner. Created a mood. I don't know.
I do want to say, I want to caveat on top of this podcast, there are no other movies than The Six. There is no 2009. There is no such thing as Chris Pine. Zachary Quinto does not exist. All of that, J.J. Abrams doesn't exist. This only covers, if we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about the original show. Yeah. We'll talk about Next Generation. We'll talk about the various TV iterations. And we'll talk about those first 6 movies.
We're not talking about the new... Are we talking about Generations? Are we talking
We
about...
can talk about Generation, sure.
So we're basically talking about this particular timeline because as probably people saw, if they were smart enough to understand what was going on, the new Star Trek movies, they kind of have their cake and eat it too, where it's like, yes, this happened. Everything that you've seen in the old Star Treks actually has happened. It's just in this particular, there was a time travel element with Spock where it created an alternate timeline. So it's like they're able to do their Star Trek that they want to do, and yet you can still have the old
way
Star
they
Trek,
threw
which is
everything.
kind of an
This
interesting...
is the only time we're going to talk about it or acknowledge it at all. This is a timeline where only William Shatner was Captain Kirk.
Yes.
All right, sir.
Number 1 on our list of things to do.
So this is the introduction for the first episode, taken from the original pitch that Gene Roddenberry wrote. Star Trek is a 1-hour dramatic television series, action, adventure, science fiction, the first such concepts with strong central lead characters plus other continuing regulars, and while maintaining a familiar central location and regular cast, explores an anthology-like range of exciting human experience. That's what he had to do to sell the show.
Yeah. Just like you said, and I've heard this before, of like, it's the wagon train to the stars.
Train to the stars.
As said by Shatner. Wagon train.
Roddenberry's proposal was dated March 11th, 1964. He goes on to pitch some episode ideas such as The Next Cage, The Day Charlie Became God, President Capone, and To Skin a Tyrannosaurus. That's not a joke. That was a serious pitch.
And if I'm not mistaken, Leonard Nimoy was kind of he was a Roddenberry pick because he worked on some other show that Roddenberry had done, like some lawyer show or something. And he's like, I like this guy.
I think.
Yeah, and he's like, I like this guy. This guy is interesting. He could, and then he pitched it to him, and he said, like, I have this character. His name is Spock. He's got the logic thing and this was the interesting thing about the first episode that we watched, which was the second pilot, even though they showed it fourth. They showed it fourth and I'm glad that they
in production order,
Yeah, because if people had seen this first, I don't know if they would have kept watching it because they were still trying to. Only because, and it was an interesting idea, but it's not the Spock we know.
Yeah, that's part of the whole thing. Well, the show was picked up for the production of a pilot, which was called The Next Cage, and then they rewrote the title, called it The Cage, starring Jeffrey Hunter and Leonard Nimoy. And a monster franchise was born, but it would take another 2 years before the series went into production. NBC rejected the first pilot, canceled the series, but left the door open for Roddenberry to retool his ideas. For as much grief as NBC gets, and this is very important, ultimately canceling the show in 1969, the Peacock Network deserves an enormous amount of credit for buying a very expensive idea and keeping it on the air for 3 years. If anything, and this is a controversial opinion that's going to be advanced throughout the run of the show, it was Roddenberry's animosity toward the network that got the show canceled, and not the insiders' dubious claims of low ratings. I say dubious because those claims were not true.
They did put it on at a weird, like the third season, they did put it on like the death slot where no one was watching.
They did, but it ultimately, it wasn't like an enormous success in the Nielsen's, but it would routinely play second in the time slot, and even win its time slot on many occasions. The demographics weren't really like calibrated to show the kind of shows that young people liked, which was their primary audience.
It wasn't like something, because I mean, even though we make fun of the cheesiness and the cheapness of it, it was at the time it was an expensive show, and one has to think like, well, yeah, but we can just put a variety show on. It costs like 1/10 as much, and we'll get almost as good ratings, and we can still
make more money from sponsors.
Make more money. So it's like I can see it from an economic standpoint. I understand it, but this was way before you had like streaming and different revenue streams and like video and like internet and Blu-ray and everything. Like they didn't have this, so they're like, well, we got to make our money now.
Yeah, and if you consider. Let's say we had a world without Star Trek up until now. This show would be enormously popular.
Would people even know how to process it if there'd never been any? Because if there was no Star Trek, there'd probably be no Star Wars either.
There is that. That is true. Lucas has gone on record saying that Star Trek was enormously influential to him.
And people might not understand this, but when Star Wars came out, it blew everybody's mind.
Mm-hmm.
It was and like our minds had been somewhat prepared, at least, because we'd seen spaceships and in these sort of the Star Trek and like space adventures and everything. Although Star Trek is more sort of, I want to say, conventional. Like it's the kind of science fiction you can understand.
Yeah.
Like they have concepts and they would put a message in there, but they would sneak it in the science fiction sort of format.
Yeah,
so
like a
you
lot
could
of other
understand.
shows did, like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits.
It was revolutionary for what it was, and that might have been why it wasn't as popular as it should have been, at least at the beginning. People didn't know
Well, I think,
what to make of it.
NBC did like the concept because they asked for a second pilot.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't like the cage. They were like, okay, they spent $500,000 on the cage.
When you say NBC, it's usually one person in charge at NBC. It's like, say, like the show Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Of like that's
right.
only on because one person thought it was funny.
Yeah,
even
one
though,
person, and also, but there was another person who was a hero for the show, a champion, and that was Lucille Ball. She really liked it, and she had a lot lot power back then.
Yeah. Because it was produced by the Desilu Studios, which eventually got bought up by Paramount. So now everything
That's right.
Paramount owns everything. But yeah, that was part of the Desilu production. Was it their first sort of production thing?
Well,
Or
they
had
had
they done
that. They had Mission Impossible, I believe.
which that's probably how, in a weird way, Leonard Nimoy ended up going to that.
Yeah, and William, I'm not sure. Yeah, Leonard Nimoy. Yeah, well, he was on that show. That's true. So
Yeah,
moving
later.
forward
Yes.
to April of 1965, NBC asked for 3 story treatments to be considered as possible second pilot productions. Roddenberry drafted his own, which was titled The Omega Glory, which would later be put into production at the end of Star Trek's second season. Sam Peoples wrote Where No Man Has Gone Before. Peoples receives credit for that iconic phrase, which would be uttered by William Shatner at the beginning of every episode. Stephen Kandel wrote The Women, which would shortly after be retitled Mudd's Women and shot near the beginning of regular production when the show was picked up. NBC chose Peoples' script, much to the chagrin and bruised feelings of Roddenberry, and production on the second pilot commenced July 19th, 1965.
Captain's log. Stardate 1312.4. The impossible has happened. From directly ahead, we're picking up a recorded distress signal. The call letters of a vessel which has been missing for over 2 centuries. Did another Earth ship once probe out of the galaxy as we intend to do? What happened to it out there? Is this some warning they've left behind?
To hear Peoples tell the story of his involvement with Star Trek, he swears he was a fan of the show before it even started rolling. I think he was just happy to get a story assignment, as most writers would be. Roddenberry was known primarily for his workman-like scripting and polishing on cop shows and westerns before he took on Star Trek. Peoples also wrote westerns mainly until he became a sought-after science fiction writer as a result of his work on the pilot. In addition to penning the famous words that became the title of his script, he also created the concept of the energy barrier that separates our galaxy from others. This is the main theme we're going to be covering with this, our first episode of Ship to Ship, and we'll also be talking about the episodes By Any Other Name from the second season and the third season episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty?
They talk about, in these episodes, they talk about the barrier, and it's at the end of the galaxy, and
Yes.
And I kept flashing forward to Star Trek V, and that's they talk about the Great Barrier, but it's the center of the galaxy.
The center of the galaxy.
It's the center of the galaxy. Where they meet, and it's
we'll never reach the Great Barrier, Spock.
Yeah, Spock.
I'm in love, Jim.
I didn't want to, Jim.
Nobody's ever gotten out of the Great Barrier alive.
What does God need with a
What does
starship?
God? I'm asking questions.
Don't ask the Almighty for his ID.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is not a review of Star Trek V. That's a whole other
We'll
show.
get to that when we get to it. You want to read the? Go ahead and read the notes I sent you.
Yeah, I'll read the thing. Okay, so the Starship Enterprise is on an exploratory mission to leave the galaxy. En route, a damaged ship's recorder of the SS Valiant, an Earth spaceship lost 200 years earlier, is found. Its record is incomplete, but it reveals that the Valiant had been swept from its path by a magnetic space storm. and that the crew had frantically searched for information about the extrasensory perception in the ship's library computer. The recorder ends with the captain of the Valiant apparently giving a self-destruct order. Kirk decides that they need to know what happened to the Valiant, and the Enterprise crosses. Let's see. The Enterprise crosses the edge of the galaxy, the Great Barrier, where it encounters a strange barrier which damages the ship's system and warp drive, forcing a retreat. At the same time, 9 crew members are killed, and both helmsman Gary Mitchell and the ship's psychiatrist Dr. Elizabeth Gaynor are knocked unconscious by the barrier's effect. When he awakens, Mitchell's eyes glow silver, and he begins to display remarkable psychic powers.
All right, very nice, very nice. Except you didn't do it like Bill Cosby, though. You should have done it.
You see, that was astonishing. I was busy doing I Spy at the time. I can't remember what was going on. I was putting a lot of things in a lot of drinks, and I was doing things. You know, Bill Cup, he's a crazy man. You know, I can't even remember half the things
crazy man.
He's the one who taught me how to put the things in the drinks, but I'm not supposed to talk about that. I put it in the Jello pudding now.
Okay, can we get on with our random observations? I got a couple, and if you have any, go ahead and interject. Considering that the show was promoted like as a color TV show, which was a big deal at the time because everybody had black and white TVs, and they were trying to get people to buy color TVs, right?
And this is I mean, in the remastered version, the colors are great. I have no idea.
They're okay.
Their original version look. I mean, they look better than I've ever seen them. I mean, I'm watching them like.
Well, yeah, they look better than how the pilot was shot, because it was very, for me, the set design and the wardrobe is really kind of drab. I thought that they were wearing these thick velour mock turtlenecks with these box butt trousers, and they're unattractive. And the only colors present are like this beige and then this like sandy blue that the science people are wearing.
In that first episode, where, and this might be a good time to my sort of interesting observations on this particular episode.
Mm-hmm.
One, Shatner's hair and the varying quality of it. At the beginning of the episode, because he's got some kind of hair or something the whole thing, but at the beginning it looks like he's got like a partial piece, because you can see there's a little bit of the thinning hair in the front, so it's like he's kind of got enough in the front.
That is his issue. Okay, now there is like this website out there called shatnerstoupee.com that insists that he not only wore a toupee, that he was completely bald and the whole thing was an effect. That's not actually true.
There was a little bit, and it looked like what they do is, it's kind of like a combination of, he has kind of thinning hair, but he still has the hairline pretty much. And what they do is they kind of put a partial piece and mix it in sort of in the hair, and then they kind of comb it, because you can kind of see like the back part doesn't quite look right, but the front is okay.
It wouldn't, but then, the thing is, if he was wearing a piece, or he was covering up something, that would kill his career. I mean, like, he's a very youthful, athletic, good-looking guy.
Yeah.
And back then they couldn't be like that.
At the time he just could. Yeah. And so and through the episode, as he's being jostled around, it looks like the piece that's like the partial piece, it seems to be kind of like becoming more frontward. So it's like the partial piece, he's got it's like he seems to have more hair in the front all of a sudden.
So he really has like a toupee that has its own personality, its own life.
Yeah, it's more poofy. At least in the first 2 episodes we watched of the first and second season.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sort of his kind of like dirty blonde color. But then in the third season, he's kind of like brown. So it's like already his hair color has changed. His hair is more full.
Well, yeah, and also I think there were different lighting choices being made in that pilot than in the second and third season episodes.
And also like Spock's look changes. He has
definitely.
He has in this episode, in that first episode we watched, which is again the 4th episode, it's more like the pilot. He has he has the Spock eyebrows, sort of the
V but they're kind
of
crazy though. They're jagged.
They're more bushy. They're more sort of big. His outfit is different, and his demeanor is different. And I noticed.
I mentioned that as well.
He's both emotionless, yet he's like cranky Spock. He's like emotion. He is very
cranky. But I wrote here that his makeup is not as severe as it was in the first pilot, The Cage, but his pallor is ruddy, and he doesn't have the yellow complexion that we all know. And also he raises his voice several times. He screams
like I said,
and yells.
He kind of screams and yells. He's more in touch with his anger. He's like angry Vulcan. He's like in touch with his, like, maybe he was just coming off of his like fanfare or something.
He would do it again 2 more times in 2 more episodes. Corbin Might Maneuver and Squire of Gothos.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to say here is that I really enjoyed the spooky atmospheric vibe that was being put forth by the story, and also by the music by Alexander Courage.
Well, the subject matter is very heavy. I mean, they get into
great.
First. You have Gary Mitchell, who, by the way, he's played by who? Gary Lockwood.
Right.
So he doesn't have to change his name. He calls him Gary already. That threw me off. And then I'm like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. And then the woman that he sort of kind of seduces with the power is of course Hot Lips, Sally Kellerman.
Yeah, Hot Lips, the original Hot Lips.
And
Sally
even
Kellerman.
then, she had that weird sort of speech impediment that she has.
She has like she has a flinty kind of sexy voice.
But
I sound like Stewie from Family Guy when I try to sound like her.
Yes, excellent. But
Blast,
I felt
what
like,
the deuce?
I noticed, like, to me, I was like looking at her, you know, she seems scrawny, but her ass is like disproportional to the rest of her scrawniness. But that's
yeah, I know.
That's a whole other thing. Although I will say,
you know what? She's not bad.
Attractive, but a little bit like just not my type. So that's just, you know, me.
And if you ask me, I'm gonna say I think the eyes really kind of bring out her sexiness. When she gets her crazy eyes later, she looks really hot. I don't know why.
Yeah, speaking of eyes, that's another thing where I felt bad for them having to wear those sort of like scary eyes. Yeah. Like it looked like they put like 2 pieces of like cardboard in their eyes and just said, okay, now act.
Yeah. And that's,
it looked painful.
You know, that was why they had to like their heads were like in a weird position because they couldn't see, so they had to look through those horrible.
And it was like there was like a whole sort of story that there was like a backstory between Kirk and Gary Mitchell.
Yeah, they were buddies.
I think they were buddies. I think Kirk was like teaching at the academy and he was at the academy. I think that's how they explained it. Were they actually okay? And he kind of like distracted him by like throwing a woman his way or something like that. When they had this
the little blonde lab technician.
And he's like, I almost married her.
That's cute. This is 1965. We're trying to pretend that this is the future. Instead, we're throwing women at people.
Yeah, and what I thought of it was that woman Carol Marcus?
Carol Oh God,
and
you planned that? Yeah, I almost married her.
I was like doing the math, and I'm like, no, that doesn't quite fit, just because of.
I don't know.
Star Trek
it might work. I think she's a little bit younger than.
If that happened, because that was 15 years ago, so you have to do the math.
Blonde lab technician. I love how she's a little blonde lab technician. She's not like this brilliant scientist that eventually invented the Genesis torpedo.
No. Yeah, I did the math of like, no, that doesn't fit. And besides, he's done so much.
He's got more than a few trophies.
He's done it a lot with a lot of women, and it's
his
like
little black book.
Know.
His little black book is about the size of most people's yellow pages.
Oh, he has like his tricorder. It's his little black tricorder.
Let me see. Little black tricorder, a little blonde lab technician. I've got 50
maybe
entries.
He has it on one of those like tapes that they use. You know, the blocky tapes that they use when he's like.
Oh, those are digital. That's optical.
Reading, like, put a tape
optical
in,
information.
like, sort of
Every Cream record, every Mott the Hoople record he wants to hear, he can just listen to it. Just pop it in.
Yeah.
And I did want to say the music. I wanted to talk about the music a little bit. Gene Roddenberry. Yes. Now Alexander Courage came up with the theme music, but Roddenberry cheated him out of full royalties by writing lyrics to the music. That way, he could have annuities for the rest of his life because he didn't have ownership of the show.
So, you're telling me that because he had Alexander Courage do the music, right? But then Gene Roddenberry put words on that music. So then, because he put the words on the music, he owned the publishing rights to that theme. Is that what you're saying?
He got half the royalties.
Half.
He didn't have the publishing rights. He just got half of any royalties instead of Alexander Courage, and he did it like as an afterthought. It wasn't even part of the original.
I think they did the same thing with the original Star Trek, the Motion Picture. the Ilea theme, it actually like has words.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called
and
A Star Beyond Time.
And that was it Roddenberry? Roddenberry who wrote the lyrics?
Roddenberry. I don't know if Roddenberry, but it was sung by Sean Cassidy.
Sean Cassidy.
He was popular at the time. It was like, this is like 79. This is like, he was made for dancing. Him and Leif Garrett, and
let me see if I can just.
You can
remember.
actually. I think you can find that on YouTube. A Star Beyond Time.
Is it that one that's like that appears at the beginning of the videotape as it's entrance music?
Yeah, it's the Ilea theme. It's, and it's like, a star beyond time.
And now I have money for...
Yeah.
Oh, neat.
There's a star beyond time, floating in space, waiting for you and me. Though we're planets apart, love is the bridge joining our galaxies. Come with me, we'll conquer the unknown, where no one's ever flown, to one star that will make our own, where the universe ends, our world begins, somewhere beyond the dawn.
I want to say the performances, with the exception of William Shatner, are a little off, and that's perhaps not understanding the dynamic in the crew. You mentioned it before that Nimoy's Spock in this episode is callous. He's cold without being terribly analytical, and he's over the top. And that works for Shatner, but not for Nimoy, who was Nimoy was always more method as an actor, and and also because of the characterization problem, we have no idea.
It seemed like he was finding the character of what Spock was. Because by the time we get to that second episode that we watched,
he's firmly in
Spock. He's firmly in Spock. He's doing the Spock thing that we know and love.
Yeah. But at this point, we have no idea who Sulu is yet. He's like some kind of I don't know what he is.
He does come in, but he doesn't say anything.
He says something about Gary Mitchell's powers getting bigger and bigger.
Okay.
And then James Doohan is Scotty, and they don't really get into him much. And then there's this other character whose name is Kelso, and he seems to be the man with the plan. But with the second pilot, Shatner is firm and he's consistent as Kirk. He's perfect. He's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Shatner is fully formed Captain Kirk already, and it's like even from the first episode that they did with him, everybody knows he's the man. He's the man. He gets all the chicks. Everybody loves him. What was interesting
when Nimoy says, "Kill Mitchell while you still can," he says, "Get out of here." Yeah. He actually says that. He tells Spock, "Get out of here." And he says, and Nimoy is like, it's the only logical thing to do. And he says, will you try for one moment to feel, or at least act like you have a heart?
That's Shatner.
Yeah, and it's like a different...
And the thing is, I just realized he would only say that to that iteration of Spock. I don't think they would ever actually have that conversation. That would be more of a conversation. That would be more of a conversation that Spock would have with McCoy, because then they get to McCoy, and it's like McCoy, you are feeling,
In this episode, we have Paul Fix playing Dr. Piper or something, who's like this really, really old man. It's not what DeForest Kelley brought to the part.
No, he brought more sort of this kind of reminds me of, to kind of like cross-pollinate here, Babylon 5.
Okay.
They had, in the pilot, they had a different doctor. And then they had a new doctor, and he was a completely different style of doctor. He was younger. It was just a completely different sort of idea of what they were going to do. So it's like it can be interesting to sort of see how certain characters play off each other if you have a different character in there. But it's
Speaking of
like,
which, we are
yes.
going to be talking about 2 different doctors a little bit later in the
Oh.
show, in this
All right.
episode.
in this episode.
In this podcast that we're doing,
Yes,
we're
in
going
this
to
podcast.
we're going to be comparing and contrasting 2 doctors. Gary Lockwood comes off as a total douchebag and carries very little sympathy during his transformation to all-knowing douchebag godbeast.
Well, see, he becomes that guy so quickly. You don't really get a chance because at the beginning, when he's hanging out with Shatner, they're just a couple of guys.
Yeah, but he kind of seems like a douche anyway.
But isn't Shatner as well? I mean, isn't Captain Kirk a douche? So it's like
Maybe,
they're like
maybe a little.
They're brothers in douchiness, and they both, they're both like from the academy. They're cocksure, as it were.
Cocksure.
And so they're doing their thing. And
but I'm happy. I'm happy when he finally dies. The only person I feel sympathy for is Sally Kellerman.
I felt like the way that he dies, it's somewhat ambiguous, because it's like the cheap,
sort of he kind of falls into a hole.
He falls in the grave, and then the rock, like it almost like it. I felt like it almost trapped him, but didn't kill him.
So you think that there could be a sequel somewhere down the line where Gary Mitchell just sort of does a carry, she pulls a carry, and his hand comes up through the grave.
The wrath of Gary Mitchell. Yeah.
I assume at the end of the episode, Kirk's log entry would read, Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell died in the line of duty, but he was a real dick about it. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but how would you even characterize? Because what do they put in the report? They put in the report. They've already kind of put in the report that Gary Mitchell lost his mind because of the exposure to the thing. What do they put in the? He died doing what? Fighting the evil or
died
something?
Being a bitch.
Yeah, he died fighting
he died as he lived.
There are a couple times when they shock him and he becomes human for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Now but he doesn't really.
Yeah, he looks at him and he goes, Jim.
That's all he does. Like
his eyes went back to normal.
As a director, as a writer, I would say in that moment, have him be like, what have I done?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But he doesn't even have the time. I would think like you have enough time to just put it in there of like, maybe like have a look in his eyes like kill me or something. I would
kill me. That
would be more Shatner.
Okay, don't kill me. I could go for a sandwich though.
Yeah.
Yes, it just took a little longer for it to happen to me.
You must help me before it goes too far.
What he's doing is right. For him and me.
And for humanity. You're still human, or
No,
at least partly you are. You wouldn't be here talking to me.
Earth is really unimportant. Before long, we'll be where it would have taken mankind millions of years of learning to reach.
And what will Mitchell learn on getting there? Will he know what to do with his power? Will he acquire the wisdom?
Please go back while you still can.
Did you hear him joke about compassion? All else, a god needs compassion! Mitchell!
Any final thoughts on Where No Man Has Gone Before, the pilot episode of Star Trek?
Okay, thoughts are interesting. Glad it wasn't the actual first episode they showed, because it probably would have put people off. Because not just because of it wasn't quite the Star Trek that we know, but also it's really heavy. You're basically talking about creating God.
That's right.
And especially at that time, it would have really. I mean,
you know what? It was very intellectual concept.
It was very intellectual, but it was like also when I'm watching this. Especially some of the later stuff with Shatner, I'm like, they would never have gotten away with this on Next Generation.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there is so many, like, it's the stuff we love about it, but at the same time, it's like, you can't, this doesn't exist in any sort of reality, and it probably didn't really exist in any sort of reality at the time.
Yeah.
Like, the sets are good for what they were trying to do, although the space, like I said, like, the space stuff that we see doesn't fit in with the clunkiness of the sets. It's like it's like the sets and everything else. It's like one step above like a Croft kind of production,
Right.
like a Lost Saucer, a Wonder Bug kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then you go to the special effects and they look good. So that's my only complaint, and that's not really a complaint against the show. And then again, it's like Proto Spock, not quite there.
Well, it's interesting because we're moving forward to 50 episodes to the end of the second season with Biennial of the Name, right?
Yeah.
Written by the great Jerome Bixby, who wrote the original story, It's a Good Life for the Twilight Zone, with
that's another one that gets really heavy, but it's less heavy and more interesting, I think.
Yes. Yeah, in this script, it was co-written or assisted. It was rewritten and polished by 3 different people: Dorothy Fontana, John Meredith Lucas, and Gene Roddenberry. But what happens is, in the original run, never mind the new visual effects that they added, but what they did was they just recycled those Great Barrier effects for this episode coming up.
Now, in this episode, Captain Kirk answers a distress call, which turns out to be a ruse by a superior race to capture the Enterprise and its crew by any other name. On NBC television network Star Trek Telecast, Friday, February 23rd. Now, a crew from an unknown galaxy, which is disintegrating, was sent out centuries before to conquer a new galaxy for its inhabitants. The current descendants, under leadership of Rojan, guest star Warren Stevens, who the hell is that? Feel that they have found this new galaxy in the Federation, but their own ship crashes and they need the Enterprise to make a return trip. Now, Captain Kirk employs a simple but powerful method to prevent a takeover by Rojan. Barbara Boucher portrays Kalinda, and Stuart Moss is cast as Hanar, 2 of Rojan's allies. You see?
All right.
And
I had to turn my microphone down so I wouldn't laugh too much.
I'm sorry. I'm glad you find it entertaining.
That was great. That was really good. I don't know what the hell iteration of Bill Cosby that is in how he said it. I guess that would be the I Spy years.
Well, it's kind of pissed off Bill Cosby. They were talking about pissed off Spock. It's like, no, it's like Bill Cosby himself, where he's just like exasperated by everything. Mine.
Okay, all right. So we go back to the Great Barrier. Thank you, by the way, for that incredible impersonation.
Thank you. Here, have a drink.
Thank you. This is delicious. Oh. So we have the recycled visual effects from Where No Man Has Gone Before, with reused dialogue from Spock indicating negative energy, negative density, negative radiation.
Yeah, I was almost expecting, but I realized it wasn't this episode. The pure energy. I was almost
pure energy.
Pure energy.
I want to know what you're feeling. Is there something on your mind? Anyway. But it's weird, though, right? Because none of them picks up ESP. They really could have used that ESP to battle the Kelvins.
And they get to ESP in the third episode that we do.
Yeah, it's a different kind. I don't know quite what that is. That gets a little trippy. But, okay, here the changes involve absconding with the starship, reducing the crew to fun-sized shapes in an effort to avoid paying for extras, and allowing Captain Kirk to do what he does best, seducing a hot babe, the beautiful Barbara Boucher, who I saw recently in an episode of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. She is stunning.
I thought so, too. And
she is
like I said, since everything is like so clear, you can see every blemish on everybody, because like I watched it on like a full HD.
Yeah.
And like plasma and everything looks great, and there was nothing wrong with her.
I mean, you know what the funny thing about it is? I think that they had to like airbrush Nimoy's teeth, because he was like a lifelong smoker, and
might have been.
His teeth were probably yellow as hell. So
yeah,
they were
one
like,
thing
we
I
can't
did
have
notice
Spock smoking.
Speaking of like touch-ups and makeup and everything, I did notice the guy really kind of like the leader of those aliens, when and we'll get to it later, but when they get to the like later part of the episode, his makeup kind of changes. Like for I'd say like 90% of it, he's this sort of nice sort of, he's got the proper makeup. He's kind of tan, but not, he's white, but he's not. But then there's like this
which
one,
alien are you talking about? Warren Stevens?
I'm talking about the leader of them, the very sort of
right, Rojan, right?
Rojan,
he's
Rojan!
Okay, can we talk about him for a second? I know that this guy is bald, and he has been wearing that piece. You can tell it's a piece in the front of his head.
It's a good piece. I'd say it's a good piece. It's like a really good, like I noticed, like the 60s.
But I think it's because Warren Stevens never went anywhere without wearing that. So everyone always thought he had a full head of hair.
And I noticed like there's this one part in the episode, his makeup is completely different, and he's pale as a ghost. And then you could think, oh, maybe he wasn't doing well that day, but it's like pale white makeup. It's kind of near the end when they're on the ship.
Wow. I would not. I have seen this episode so many times, I would never been able to catch that.
Spock's contaminating this boy, Jim.
If you go back, like just go back to like the part, I think it's near the part, it's kind of like not the end part when they're on the ship, but like a little before. I think it's when he's having a conversation with the really hot woman, and they're sort of like, his makeup looks.
Is that wait, later on in the episode where he grabs her and he says, "You will do what I say."
You'll do what I say,
or I will kill Captain Kirk and everyone aboard.
Something like that. There's a part, I can't remember. It's not the end when they have the final sort of realization of what they're going to do, but it's like before that, and his makeup is different.
Well, where do we get to as far as the story? Basically, I guess Kirk tries to seduce the woman, of course.
Yeah.
McCoy gives this other guy stimulants, and then Scotty tries to get a guy drunk. And
don't forget, Spock tries to do like a mind meld. He tries to do a mind meld with
Barbara Boucher. He tries to do this thing that he did in the previous episode.
But he does it through the rock, which
he does it through the rock. Number one, and number two, he has a traumatic episode because they're not human. They're not humanoid. He says that they're like
human forms. And
he says they're like octopus creatures or something with tentacles.
Yeah, you find out later that they took human forms because it's almost like they saw the ship coming, so they decided to take human forms.
Right.
So they could, because they couldn't fly, they couldn't just come in as an octopus. This isn't Galaxy Quest. You can't just be an octopus and like. In fact, I just realized that might have been where they got the idea. Because if you remember Galaxy Quest, they took human forms so they could fly that ship or something.
Yeah.
And their
they're
original
all like
form
little
was
squiggly.
Yeah.
You are now listening to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with David Lawler and David B. Anderson. Boldly podcasting, where no podcast has... I'm not reading this. I'm not. Where's my coat? I'm getting out of here. I hate it here.
Ship.
Hailing frequency zones.
Ship.
This episode's a lot of fun, but it suffers from tone issues. Just when you think it's going to be funny, it turns deadly. When an escape attempt is thwarted by the Kelvins, they turn two of Kirk's crew into these dusty dodecahedrons, one of which Warren Stevens crushes in his hand, and Kirk is momentarily traumatized by the death. But then we get back into the funny business.
And it actually says on the description, this is what's funny. On the description on Netflix, because they give a little sort of like description of the episode.
Yeah.
It says Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and a couple of red shirts.
And a couple of red shirts, yeah.
They say actually a couple of red shirts beam down to a planet, and then they explain what happens. But I'm like, okay, the couple of red shirts, something bad is going to happen, because we already know if you're in the red shirt, something's bad going to happen. And sure enough, there's one kind of tall-ish black dude, and then there's this one really cute girl.
Yeah, the cute girl who can't act. She can't act worth a damn. Julie Cobb, unfortunately.
So when they come in and sort of show like, because they try and escape, and when like Spock tries to mind meld with the rock, which confused me because he does like mind meld with an actual like rock creature in an episode.
Yeah, Horta.
Yeah. And so that was like, is he communicating with the planet or something? I didn't really. So then, and one thing I did like though was when he does that. I think it's when he does that. They do the Spock music, So it's like do
Yeah.
do 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 do. So I'm like, okay, he's getting some Spock action there. He's doing something.
Yeah.
So then they try and escape, and of course, this is another thing I noticed with Shatner. He does the karate chop. He tries to get people.
Yeah. He does the Captain Kirk chop on Barbara there.
Boom. Yeah.
Knocks her out, I guess, and then all of a sudden they get frozen in place by that weird little thing on their belt.
And so they take those the two red shirts get sort of like they make an example of them.
As a leader, you realize the importance of discipline. I need you and these other specialists, but those two are unnecessary.
I'm responsible. Let them go.
I think we're somewhat alike, Captain. Each of us cares less for his own safety than for the lives of his command. We feel pain when others suffer for our mistakes. Your punishment shall be to watch them die. Captain? Proceed, Hanar.
And then they shrink them down into these as Carl Sagan would say, a dodecahedron. A sort of a small sort of cube-like, but it's a dodecahedron.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a sponge thing, but it's dry. It's like a dry sponge, and he's like, as an example, now we can kill and we can. Here's what we can do: we can save them or we can kill them. And so what he does is he takes one of them and he crushes it. And I'm like,
yeah.
I kind of yelled at the TV and I went, don't let it be the brother. Don't come on. No, come on. They've had it so tough. It's the 60s.
Actually, I was a little pissed when that happened, and then he hit the thing again, and then the black security guy is okay.
Yeah.
And Kirk's like, oh shit, you killed a beautiful woman. And he holds the powder in his hands, and he's like, I'm gonna snort you. I'm gonna snort you.
I haven't slept with you yet. Damn it.
Okay, so the problem here is that I think they threw a lot of humor into the episode, and they shouldn't have, because it's kind of serious when a crewman is killed. I just felt like it was just...
So it's like as that guy in Napoleon Dynamite was saying, it's getting pretty serious.
Yeah, I know. Now, I wanted to advance this idea to you. Considering what the Kelvins have done, kidnapping, hijacking, murder, attempted murder, false imprisonment, reckless endangerment, assault and battery, they should be taken into custody and dropped off at the nearest starbase to await a trial for their crimes, rather than be taken back to the planet to live a new existence as humanoids. Considering their belief in their own moral superiority and their predilection for conquest, I would consider their race extremely dangerous to the security of the Federation.
Yeah, but I think it was kind of the thought at the end was they'd been human for so long, although they didn't really explain how long they'd been human, that they've been corrupted enough, certainly by the time they get to Shatner, they're being completely corrupted because he's corrupting them with his Shatnerness.
Yeah.
So it's like, and now she wants him.
So you think they should Shatner would be like, well, you know what? We kind of gave them this feeling, so it's not completely
they gave
their
them
fault.
The gift. It's kind of like, it kind of goes into like, recycled plot ideas. It's like, you can kind of see the recycled plot ideas of different. I mean, you have it kind of goes back to Star Trek V of, the stolen ship. I was at some point expecting like, what does God need with the starship or something like that. And then you also have like kind of like the end of Star Trek the Motion Picture where it's like they created a new life form.
Yes, perhaps the next step in our evolution.
By virtue of hanging around Shatner.
And Decker, don't forget Decker, who is kind of a Shatner in training.
Shatner, yes. But it's like Shatner is able to show them, V'ger, we are the creator,
That is not logical.
Yeah.
I love
a great
Persis
movie,
Kambana.
an underrated film, but we'll probably get to that at some point later.
All right, so this episode boasts a great new musical score from Fred Steiner, of which portions would be retracked for future episodes. Steiner was the son of film composer Max Steiner, as talented as he was prolific, churning out new scores per season of Star Trek in the original production run. Now, I wanted to get into a little bit of the new visual effects. Now, in the original episode, before it was remastered, it was the same effect, but they added new effects for this one. It looked really good, and there is a really nice, beautiful new effect of the Enterprise heading toward Andromeda, I thought it was a great effect. It even looked good in the original. It was really good even in the original.
I just realized, like, the special effects in this, in the sort of the remastered, they're better than the special effects in Star Trek V.
Coin a phrase. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Some of them anyway.
Yeah, I know.
And
that's
like,
kind of.
I felt like that's not necessarily the fault. I mean, we keep going into the movies, but I felt like that wasn't necessarily the fault of the movie makers, that they just couldn't get the good people. And you know how they make movies, of they have a release date, and then they're like, okay, make a movie. Here's your money.
Yeah. From what I understand, they wanted, for Star Trek V, they wanted ILM, but ILM was too busy. They were working on like 5 or 6 different really big movies for that
their
summer.
A team was doing Indiana Jones. Their B team was doing Ghostbusters too. So they got like they didn't have.
So
anybody.
they had to get this guy Bran Farron, who's very good. If he has a smaller scale, he did effects for like Altered States. He's a good, talented man. And they were in a rush, and they had no money because Paramount cut their budget. And you know they had to go with what they. But for this is all computer. It's all done in a computer, and it looks really good. I don't get all weird and nerdy when it comes to the remastered versions, because I know the fans, hardcore Star Trek fans, get crazy about that.
It's an attempt to sort of repackage it, I think. And
I like it because a lot of those effects from the original show are really bad. A lot of them are really bad.
That's part of the fun of this. Is like you can't change sort of the interior special effects sets. And
well, they
like
kind of did with color correction. They corrected a lot of it, and I think the color correction was gave it more contrast and more hue.
They were trying to get it to what because you know they treat now they treat film better, but at the time it was just they didn't care, so they had to basically they're trying to get as close to the original look of the film when it was originally came out of the canister and was there and then broadcast by NBC. So
but I got a problem with that too, because the publicity for the remastered effects claimed that they took it from original camera negatives, and I don't think they did. I think they took it from completed answer prints, because there's some time cheating going on with some of the dissolves that cover up the removal of the original visual effects. It's like they ran it through a computer, you know, in like Premiere or maybe Avid or something like that. Or even Sony, or even their own proprietary editing software.
Yeah.
And then they cut those effects out of the original and then put their new effects. They just slip them right in.
I think the way they do it is, I think this is the way they did the James Bond movies as well. They don't restore on film. They take whatever ratty print that's the best print that they can get.
The best print, the cleanest one.
The cleanest, best print that they can get. They scan it through the computer, they like a 4K scan, and then they digitally clean it up bit by bit and piece by piece, and then they color correct it and make it look as close to what, and then they'll try to like have like a reference piece of film that maybe isn't rotted away or something, so that they know what it looks like if they're going for something original. Now they can go overboard and they can clean up movies and they look terrible, and they'll do too much cleanup and they'll have a kind of a waxy look to their faces. And it's like, no, you want the film grain, you want the noise. The noise.
I want that. That's exactly what I was talking about with my friend Andrew for Extreme Cinema. We talked about the Dirty Harry movies. I got the Blu-ray transfers of the Dirty Harry movies, and they look fantastic. They look faithful. You know, they don't look like anybody was trying to clean it up too much or make it brighter or more detailed. I felt like I was, you know, it's before my time, but I felt like I was watching something that was meant for the theater.
You're watching something from the 70s, because, like, you want it. You don't want it too clean, but you want it accurate. You want it like whatever film looked like then, whatever a good print was supposed to be at the time, even if it wasn't as good as something you could do now.
Absolutely,
it's like you want it exactly what it looked like, and they did that with the James Bond movies, where they messed up with the James Bond movies in a weird way with a newer one where it's like they're all really good, like. All the old ones are restored, like they're fully 4K restorations. I think up to Pierce Brosnan, so up to like License to Kill. They've all been fully restored.
To Timothy Dalton.
To the end of Timothy Dalton. Then you get to Pierce Brosnan. Now that was right around the time of DVD coming out and digital transfers, and HD transfers would be a couple years later. And so what they did was they probably had a rudimentary HD master for GoldenEye when they made it on DVD, like early HD.
Right.
And it looks like
early, I want to say Attack of the Clones, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, something like that. And so it's like, okay, we've got an HD master, but we're mostly going to be cranking out like DVDs because HD hasn't come along yet. And so with GoldenEye, it's HD, but then what they do is they're like, oh, this looks grainy, so we're just going to clean this up a little bit. So there's like parts that look great, but then there's other parts that look like smeary. They just sort of they turned the digital like cleanup a little too far.
Yeah.
And that's the only one of the box set that's like not good, because the rest of them were in the age of like HD masters. They look good, they're clean, they don't need to be like restored because they're already really good HD versions of the movie.
That's why that's why I think you're on the money if you say it was a 4K scan of these of the better film elements that they had for these episodes, and clean them up. And they even removed, I don't know how they did it, but they removed like little hairs, little bits of specks on the film, because I had those originals memorized in my head, and I thought they did a fine job for what they had.
Yeah, I think they cleaned them up before.
The sound is even good too. I mean, the sound, they worked on the sound.
It's kind of an enhanced. They take the mono and then they enhance it, and there are a couple times with music where it's actually like in stereo surround, but most of the time it's just sort of and it's like a good kind of enhanced. It's not like that sort of tin can enhanced.
Yeah.
But I remember that when Next Generation started, in '87, they kind of re-released the old Star Trek episodes and put them back on TV, or maybe even a little before, like in anticipation of.
Yeah.
And those were way cleaner. So this is almost probably like a second or third remaster of those, because they had like it was basically a standard def remaster. Yeah,
they had, when the VHS tapes came out, I had a
that might have been what they
were.
Like it was the ones that it was like the masters that they used for the VHS tapes in the mid '80s.
Those VHS tapes were very good. Those early VHS tapes.
But and those were way better than what you would watch on TV like when Star Trek, in the reruns. Those things I remember, like they were like, whatever they would show on TV was probably like 16 millimeter prints.
Yeah, they were really ratty. They were
ratty, really... yeah. And you'd watch them and be like, it's TV, it's free.
Yeah, those were like on old either like U-Matic or Betacam SP masters that they had for the broadcast versions, and you play those so many times.
I seem to remember like weird edits to get more commercials in and things.
Yeah.
That's another thing of like, these are, as far as I know, these are the full 50 minutes. They're not 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's not these weird edits that you would get on those.
And now we're down to like 41 minutes if they show them on TV.
Yeah.
So it's like 9 minutes are being cut out of these things. It's horrendous to watch. Any final thoughts about By Any Other Name?
Okay. Let's see. Well, to sum up, they went to a planet. They got Shatnerized.
Yeah.
He showed them the way. They tried to steal his ship, kind of Star Trek V style, but then he Shatnerized them some more. And then what they were gonna do was they were going to take over. They were gonna take over the ship, and they were going to kill everybody because they couldn't sustain the life forms. So, but they didn't kill everybody. They cubized them. They dodecahedronized them.
Right.
So to kind of give you to kind of almost tell the audience, okay, these people aren't going to die. Because like if they just killed the whole crew, that would have been heavy. But so yeah, they do that. Then Shatner explains in sort of a Shatner speech of like, no, don't you understand? You're human and whatever.
He's holding him in like a bear hug or something.
Yeah, he's like
at the end.
Yeah, he's holding the man in the bear hug.
I forgot to mention. Remember where Kirk asked Spock to put himself in a trance? So he puts his hand to his face and he puts himself into a trance.
Yeah,
and then he falls.
So they could fake. You know what?
McCoy has this look on his. McCoy goes nuts. He like holds out his arms. He's like, oh, it's really funny.
Well, yeah, he hasn't fully experienced the Spock, the Vulcan experience yet until he finally in Star Trek 3 he gets mind melded.
Yeah, that's true. And
Which I always thought was like-
Nimoy gets
was
a
like-
funny crack in there where he says, well, Shatner says, Kirk says, Vulcans have the ability to put themselves into a trance, and he says, we consider it more restful to the body than your so-called vacation.
Yes. And the guy's like, what the hell?
I did, despite all the problems with the tone, going from serious to funny to serious to funny, it was a very enjoyable episode.
Yeah, it was. It was entertaining. Of like, okay, I felt that was much more Star Trek than the first one that we watched.
It's in keeping with the stereotype or the cliche of what Star Trek is.
Classic. It's not the best Star Trek because it's not. And sometimes the best Star Treks are. Sometimes the best ones are the bad ones. When it's like somebody's like it's not like
brain and brain. What is brain?
Storytelling wise might not be great. Plot wise might not be great. But when it has the full Shatner, like there are levels of Shatner. When he goes full Shatner, it's always awesome. But it's like unintentionally.
Oh, we are going to see a little bit of full Shatner in the next episode.
Yeah. Okay.
We now come to the third season, produced by Fred Freiberger, episode 60 in production order, aired October 18th, 1968. Is There in Truth No Beauty? Written by Jean-Lisée Aroes. It's very hard to pronounce, she's French. And our third and final trip to the Great Barrier at the center of the galaxy. This episode is a personal favorite of my wife's because she's a big fan of Diana Muldaur, who plays Miranda in this episode. Brahman also loves Dr. Pulaski, the character she played in the second season run of Star Trek Next Generation.
I know her, and it made me sad because she's really hot in this.
Oh, yeah.
And on Next Generation, it's almost like she went to the trouble of not looking as good as she could.
I know.
Maybe it was the 80s.
My wife says the same thing. She says she's so beautiful in this episode, and she plays Dr. Anne Mulhall in another original second season episode, Return to Tomorrow, which we'll get to at some point.
I'm just trying to do the math of her age of like she's probably in her early 30s in this.
I would say late 20s, early 30s.
So you got to go ahead to Next Gen, which is 20 is 20. Her on that was in.
Let's say 20 years later. Yeah.
20 years later.
That would put her.
That would have made her like maybe in her late 40s, early 50s, maybe.
Yeah. Oh maybe wait, I wanted to ask you because yes. I'm more of a Dr. Crusher kind of guy, but that's what makes my marriage to my wife interesting. Who do you prefer? Did you like Dr. Pulaski or Dr. Crusher?
You know what? I didn't. No, because I felt like she was interrupting something. Because I was like, well, where's Dr. Crusher? She's Wesley's mom. Why is she gone? And I think there was some sort of interesting sort of contract dispute, or I don't exactly know why she left, but she came back the next year.
It might have had something to do with money. What I found funny was that Picard says to Wesley, your mother left to head Starfleet Medical, and then she comes back the next year. I got to think maybe she was really bad at her job,
Well, that's what you get when you hire women,
Maybe she accidentally killed somebody or something. I don't know.
Mind meld went wrong or something.
Okay, I'm gonna send you the description.
I mean, the third. Okay, now I know where to look. So.
Okay, and you can misspell because for some reason in the NBC press release they misspelled Medusan. You can do this as Bill Clinton if you want.
No, I'll do this as Bill Clinton. Mr. Spock, upon gazing upon a Mendusian, will die of madness unless Captain Kirk can persuade a woman. I know something about that. Already jealous of Spock's mental powers to save him from performing a dangerous mind link on NBC television network Star Trek Friday, October 18th. In this episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty? Diana Muldaur had her. Guest stars as Miranda, a woman resentful of Spock's ability to mentally communicate with the Mendusian, inside of which drives humans insane, and David Finkham as Maverick, her jealous suitor.
Very nice. Had her. Sounds a little bit like Trump. I had her. I totally had her. Okay.
It's huge.
Okay, I should note that this NBC press release dated September 17th, 1968, misspells the word Medusan not once but twice, which shows just how much NBC cared about promoting Star Trek at that point. I rather like this episode, but the style is a bit out of whack, if I must get technical.
I'm going to say that because
Yeah.
that was what sort of stuck out for me was maybe it was just the psychedelia of the time. It almost felt like a Monkees episode, like with weird angles.
Oh, my wife would appreciate that. She writes for the Monkees, actually.
But
it's rather than having the focus of the narrative on Kirk, Spock, or McCoy, or all three, we're instead like being sucked into the story of unrequited love, jealousy, madness involving visitors to the Enterprise.
There's interesting sort of like M. Night Shyamalan revelations in the middle of it of like the woman is blind, but she has like this special suit, so she you don't know she's blind, and she doesn't really do like the blind face.
I love how Kirk didn't even have a clue. Neither did Spock, right? Only McCoy.
Well, he's
knew. He's like, I realize you can do anything a sighted person can do. Suddenly Kirk's like, what?
What?
And Spock is like, he waves his hands in front of her face and goes, fascinating. He had no clue. We have
fully formed Spock again. Like that's one of the things where I was like, I did enjoy it, just because when you see, I guess after seeing that first episode we did, where he was Spock but not Spock, it was a little jarring for me.
Right.
Just to see not Spock, to see like proto Spock, and then to see Spock in full Spock mode. I'm like, okay, now I know what's going on. I need Spock to be Spock.
We have the beautiful raven-haired Miranda Jones escorting the Medusan ambassador Kalos, who lives in a box, back to their home planet. She can communicate telepathically with Kalos, and apparently they have like a little side gig going, some kind of non-physical sexual relationship. So Spock is jealous of her because of the opportunity to study the Medusans. Miranda's jealous of Spock for his emotional detachment and psychic abilities.
Remember, he has
and
to
Kirk just wants to screw her.
Yes. So do I. But wait, I already had her. But I feel like he had to put the special 3D glasses on to be able to communicate with him. But she didn't.
Yeah, because she's blind.
Because she's blind. Now, wouldn't they have figured that out before? Or did she put the glasses on to sort of play along?
Actually, no. Actually, at the beginning when they beam her aboard, she is wearing the glasses. To fool everybody.
That kind of like is almost like a deception.
Yes, it is.
That's probably why she has the dress on, because like she has like a special sort of sensing dress that they kind of like talk about, of like she has this dress so she can kind of like she can sort of see, she can
says,
feel
my
around.
compliments to you and to your dressmaker.
Yeah.
Everything revolves around her, so she has this annoying Mary Sue quality. It's wish fulfillment on the part of the writer, maybe. Maybe the writer wanted to have a four-way with the three leads there. So Larry Marvick, who's like this crazy guy, he's very crazy, and he's good at being crazy too. He tries to kill Kalos.
He's lovesick in a weird sort of stalkery way.
Why did I ever meet you?
I've been honest with you. I simply cannot love you the way you want me to.
Miranda.
And I'm going away with Carlos. That's final. I think you better leave now. So it's you. I didn't know that it was you before. Who is it you want to kill, Larry? Is it me?
Actually, even though my wife really likes the episode, she notes a lot of the sexist dialogue coming from Marvick. He's like, why don't you try being a woman for a change? I mean, what's a woman to him, you know?
Like, I know what a woman is.
Why don't you get yourself married and have some kids? I
am very familiar with women.
Yes, you are, Mr. Clinton. So he goes to engineering. Well, he tries to kill Kalos. The box opens. Marvick goes nuts. Now, this is the thing about Medusans, is if you look at them, you go nuts, which is just lovely. But he beats up Scotty. He takes the Enterprise to, you guessed it, the Great Barrier.
The Great Barrier, yes.
Beyond the borders of our galaxy. Conveniently, for the plot, Medusans are skilled navigators. So Spock mind melds and joins brains with Kalos, becomes two people. And it's always nice to see Leonard Nimoy spread his wings as an actor.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, like it was nice to see him be Spock, but it was also interesting to see him be sort of Spock with the, he was like two people. Because like the first thing he does is I think he smiles.
Yeah,
like when he does the mind meld.
This is like, delightful.
Yeah, this is delightful.
And then he goes over to Uhura and he's like, she walks in beauty like the night. And McCoy looks at Kirk and says, that's not Spock. And he says, are you surprised to find I've read Byron, Doctor? And he says, that's Spock.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. But okay, so they save the ship. They get it out of the barrier and back into regular space or something, right? Again, no one gets any ESP. It's just like, just one little plot element. We've dropped it. It no longer works. But he forgets, okay, he's about to do the mind transfer, and he forgets to put his protective sunglasses on, and he goes nuts, and he beats the crap out of the bridge crew before he gets phasered.
Yeah,
and
but
now it's up to Miranda to repair Spock's
If I'm not mistaken, like
psyche.
she's the one that she'd put some sort of like psychic spell on him so that he wouldn't put his glasses on, right?
That's an issue. Okay, you know what? You are not the first person to advance that theory. It's never really explained.
No, but they talk about it. They
forgets.
say because he sort of I think Shatner
Yeah, I know,
says
Kirk,
it. I
right?
think Kirk
He grabs
says, he
her,
says like
he starts
like
screaming
doesn't
at
he
her?
say something to her like you made him you made him forget to put those glasses on.
He's
or
like,
something
what did you do? Make him forget to put the eyeglasses on? She's like, that's a lie.
Face reality, Captain. His mind has gone down almost too far even for me to reach.
If you don't reach him soon, he'll die. But that's what you want, isn't it?
That's a lie.
Oh, yes, it is. You want him to die. What did you do to him on the bridge? Did you make him forget to put the visor over his eyes?
You're insane.
Yes, you know your rival, don't you? You couldn't keep him from making a mind link with Collis, something that you couldn't do yourself. With my words, I'll make you hear such ugliness that Spock saw when he looked at Collis with his naked eyes. The ugliness is within you.
It's a lie. Liar.
No passion to see Collis's madness. You can never see, never.
Well, she's a liar, so you know.
He's like, why don't you strangle him while he lies there? He's like doing this tough love. He's like, Kirk would be a fantastic father, because that's how fathers talk to their children. It's this very passive-aggressive child psychology thing he does with her. It's a fun episode again, but I think for the first time we're subjected to this kind of a soap opera. It's like, as the Enterprise turns, one Spock to live.
Probably the least good of the three we watched, I would say. Interesting ideas, but not fully formed. And I was like, there's so many interesting ideas that could have been pursued but weren't. And it was a little confusing where, she's human, but she's blind, but she's psychic. And all these things are kind of revealed one after the other. And you have that thing in the box where it's like an entity or something. It's like,
aren't you expecting Thing from the Addams Family to come pop out of that thing?
Okay. Well, don't they kind of show it? Like it's like this sort of like,
it's a weird special effect, right?
It's a weird sort of
psychedelic thing.
It's like almost like I want to say like a matrix table from Land of the Lost or something. It's like it looks like it's like sort of like crystals, and it kind of like shines and it's colorful and everything. It looks like they just had something left over from another show and they just sort of put some lights on it and like put it in a box.
I did say the visual effects for the barrier this time around in the original episode were created specifically for the episode, so it wasn't recycled footage from Where No Man Has Gone Before. And there's some really new, beautiful shots of the ship in situ, and those effects get better with the remastered version. Very nice.
Yeah, and then when it ends, it just sort of ends. Like they get there, they meet she's like, it kind of wraps itself up of like, well, I've caused all this damage. Goodbye.
Yeah. It's that's never explained.
Okay, well, thank you all. Now I've now after deceiving everyone, I can now mind meld with the Medusian guy, which is what I was supposed to do in the first place, and I'll go off on this other ship now. Goodbye.
But still, I don't understand the idea of having some kind of a non-physical relationship with this creature, whatever it is. I mean,
well, I think she does
it
say something
obviously
about, like,
loves her.
Doesn't
she
she say
loves
something
it.
about like, what is it to be beautiful or ugly? Who's to say?
Yeah, she probably
She say something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
that's
doesn't.
where it does get like weird and sexist with Shatner, like, but you're such a beautiful woman, you shouldn't be in it.
Yeah, everybody's all over her. At the risk of sounding prejudiced, here's the beauty, Dr. Miranda Jones.
Yeah. They basically almost like surround her at the table. It's like it's all dudes and her.
Yeah.
And luckily, she's like, although I don't think we know this till later in the episode, she's blind, so she's like, she can somewhat sort of detach from the situation because she doesn't have to look all these idiots in the eye.
Yeah.
Because they're basically got like little sort of space boners under the table,
Yeah, I don't, it's weird. I don't know what McCoy wants. He is like being like, he's got his Southern gentleman thing cranked up for her. Mm. He's like, to whatever you want the most, Miranda.
Yeah.
I'm going to bend over, and when I do, stop. No, yeah. You know how that goes.
I feel like they see, it's like all of them see a pretty girl, and they become jelly. And
yeah, I don't know. What is Uhura? What is Yeoman Janice Rand? What is all these hotties that are always walking around with their mini skirts?
In the two episodes that with that had her in, I'm like, that is one hot woman.
Yeah. Yeah, and Barbara Boucher too. I mean, they act like we never seen a beautiful woman before we saw
you, my God, Shatner's
nailing... You call him Dr. Jones, doll.
Yeah. But like Shatner is like, I'm sure he's doing the whole crew, all the female crew at least, and
Jesus Christ, got all these girls walking around in the micro mini skirts.
I don't know if these people are actually like the writers are actually understand, like if you're getting it pretty regularly from different women, that kind of stuff. It calms down at least. Like you don't become this. You turn into like you turn into Clinton. You're just like, hey, how's it going? Maybe not. Something could happen. Maybe not. That's all right because I got something set up for later. That's all right. You just kind of maybe I mean it wouldn't work on Spock because he has to be.
He doesn't really care.
He doesn't really care, and when
priorities are
every 7 years he cares, but
yeah,
and he has to be a Vulcan, and.
When we get to that, we're gonna have issues with that one. I have issues with that episode, but when we get to it,
so
this is just the pilot. I did want to mention Jean-Lisette Arroes had never written a script before. She was a librarian at UCLA at the time she tried her hand at a treatment. Bob Justman, who was the co-producer, bought it out of hand. It was
was this since this is the third season? This is already after they like the reason it came back was because of the fans. The reason it didn't get canceled after 2 seasons was because of the fans.
Yeah.
So was she kind of like part of that fan base?
Yeah, she was a fan of the show, and what's more, this was unsolicited. This script, she sent it, sight unseen to Paramount. And
I guess it was back in the days when they would actually open their mail and read letters and actually somewhat interact with their public.
Yeah, Justman always kept the door ajar for like untried or amateur writers.
Although, from what I know, that's kind of still the policy. At least it was during Next Generation, because that's kind of how like one of the main guys of Next Generation who would like either Ronald D. Moore or Brannon Braga or both of them. I don't know, but they were like fans that wrote. They were like Star Trek fans that wrote scripts, and somehow they got to them, and they were like, hey, like you.
And they wound up advancing. They don't do that anymore, unfortunately.
They don't do that anymore because
writing and production are now hand in hand. Producers are writers, and a lot of producers think they can write more, and they're thinking more about the budget. Whereas, like, I remember having this discussion with you a few weeks back. That's probably because it was right
before the internet, and everybody's an expert now. So
yeah, and what they would do with writers on the show and on other shows is they would send out writer's guides to anybody who was like a writer and interested in writing a script or a story treatment, and then they would send the treatment back to the producer. The producer would okay it or have problems with it, reject it, or take it, and then they would work on it a little bit with the writer. But that isn't done. That's not being done now. This episode is what was called a bottle show, meaning all of the action takes place on the ship. Paramount cut the budget of the show, but NBC demanded more episodes to take place on different planets and different locations. So the producers were in a bind as to how they would go about selecting teleplays for production. So NBC gives Paramount the production money based on ad revenue or whatever considerations, and then Paramount then funnels the money to production after absorbing its own production costs. So NBC sort of caused its own problem with the show when the budget was downsized. They basically cut the production budget but gave everybody raises to adjust for it. No, Shatner and DeForest Kelley are particularly good in this episode. Nimoy kind of overshadows them whenever he does anything where he emotes. And I think David Frankham creates a sympathetic picture with which I think most, if not all, men can relate. Because you remember how he is. He goes nuts. He says, "Don't love her. Don't love her. She'll kill you if you love her." You know?
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, I felt that way about a few ex-girlfriends I had. Okay, this is my major problem with the episode, is that until our three leads become directly involved with the story, they almost seem like they're guest stars on their own show. The whole show belongs to Diana Muldaur. And
yeah,
I
just realized, like, it's mostly about her, but at the same time, she's not necessarily a sympathetic character.
No, she's not. She's not terribly likable. I did want to mention also there's a continuity error at the end of this episode. I don't know if you caught it. Captain Kirk goes insane, but we never see it. Because Spock has to wear the protective sunglasses in order to safely transport Kalos without going mad. Kirk observes Kalos being transported. So, and he's not wearing sunglasses. So,
Are you sure he's looking? Are you sure he's actually looking?
He was there. Look at it again. I promise you. He is staring right at the transporter platform. As soon as he leaves, right before the end credits roll, he should have gone mad. So it would have been fun to hear his lunatic scream as we fade out. This was it was an editing glitch, and it upset the director when he saw the final cut. He was like, "Wait a minute, he's not wearing sunglasses. Why do we have that shot of him?"
Not the best, but like, again, not terrible. It's like watching all three of these episodes. This is like an education. So it's like, even if it's not good, it's interesting. It's always interesting, even if it's not good, because I always get a laugh. Mostly at Shatner,
right,
doing his Shatner stuff. So, and his karate chop, which. It just reminds me of every Austin Powers, like karate chop. You know, it reminds me of that. And
remember when Nimoy is going nuts and he's staring at the weird fisheye point of view lens?
Yeah.
And he's looking at Kirk, and Kirk is holding his arms out, and he says, "It's all right. You're safe with us now." That was great.
Yeah. So, not the best. In fact, probably of the three, the least good. But, you know, it's kind of goes back to we were talking about James Bond movies earlier. Even a bad one is still entertaining. And there's always something good in there. And so that's my thought of, you know, to anybody listening to this podcast is watch it anyway. Even if it's not the best, it's still not that bad. And it's
even if it's not the best, it's still not that bad.
Still not that bad. And if you catch it on Netflix, or I think it's on Amazon too, you said?
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Okay. Or Blu-ray, you're going to see the best version of it you've ever seen. It's going to look crisp, clear, nice. They're going to add some special effects. The sound is going to be good. It's a sort of a renewed experience of Star Trek just in general.
All right.
I am tired. Let's get the hell out of here.
Let's wrap this up. This has been a lot of fun. Good discussion. Yeah. 3 episodes. What'd you think of it, David?
Of the podcast or of the episodes?
Of the podcast.
The podcast. I thought we're doing great, and I'm glad that you're letting me do voices.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you find it amusing.
Do voices. Come up with new ones too. Every week.
Yeah.
Or every 3 weeks, as the case
Perhaps
may
I
be.
can do Arnold, you know.
All right, let's wrap it up. I'm David Lawler. That was David B. Anderson. This has been Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, and we will be back every 3 weeks or so to discuss episodes and the kooky, crazy themes that unify them. Thank you very much for tuning in. Good night.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with your hosts, David Lawler and David B. Anderson. To find out more about us, subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit us at www.blissville.net or on Facebook at Misadventures in Blissville. Good night.